When I was in his arms, I felt his heart beating with great intensity. I thought there was a possibility that it would culminate in a gratifying experience for both of us. Seeing the sparkle gleam of his red lips, I imagined that he was challenging me to take the initiative. There was about 3 feet of distance between us. It was easy to approach him in a second and give him a kiss. He didn't pull away. He seemed pleased, and I kissed him again, but this time with the voracious desire of a lover burning in flames. I clung to him like a magnet. The boy participated. He didn't resist. It was the commotion caused by his friends who, on seeing us kissing, verbally assaulted us. That commotion snapped him out of his trance. His friends were scandalized. They had already gotten out of the car and were encouraging him to hit me. The boy angrily separated from me and threw me to the ground. He looked confused, but at the same time ready to beat me. From the ground, I saw him about to charge at me. Like a bull, feeling defenseless, I closed my eyes, resigned to accept whatever fate had in store for me.
Were you aware that you were the one who initiated the altercation?
No. I was a hungry person. I stumbled upon an exquisite feast on a desolate path and, without questioning its ownership, claimed that gorgeous feast without considering the possible consequences.
And what did the owner do when he found himself deprived?
He resisted the urge to beat me up and left.
Surely he was afraid of physically assaulting you in a public place. He ran away from you to avoid a confrontation with the police.
We were in an abandoned place in the middle of the night. The group of boys was disoriented, stressed by being in an unknown location. Those boys were not from the city. Unfamiliarity with the surroundings made them feel scared. They were Swedish tourists.
How did you realize they were foreigners? Did you talk to them?
No, I sensed it. At that moment, I had the gift of divination. I didn't need to interpret dreams or read tarot cards. The information came to me instantly. I had the ability to perfectly interpret the living language of people, facial expressions, emotional states, and body language.
You approached him, sexually harassed him. It didn't escalate further because you weren't alone. His friends were in the way. He left, ashamed that his friends had seen him in the midst of an encounter with you.
You're right, although you must consider that I was under the influence of paranormal activity. I don't take risks like that. In my daily life, I always avoid dangerous situations. I don't have the confidence or determination necessary to effectively seduce strangers. I prefer to act like a coward in those circumstances.
So, were the extraterrestrials the ones who came to provide you with inner security? Sorry for mentioning the word again.
I'm starting to accept that you might be right. What I experienced was an encounter with a being from another world. It's valid to use the word extraterrestrial. The encounter brought me more than just security. You'll understand later what I mean.
At what time did the extraterrestrial appear?
Shortly after the boys left. I was still lying on the ground. I got up, crossed the road, and went to the spot where I had seen that light disappear. I began to inspect, but found nothing. There was no spaceship. The whole place was empty. What was present was the imprint. All the bushes were flattened, forming a nest as if a sphere of great weight had forcefully impacted that place and then disappeared, leaving a gap formed by the impact. But I saw nothing else. I was there for a while, contemplating that.
Were you still alone in that place? Wasn't anyone else nearby? Did other people pass by, people wandering around? Nothing? No one?
While observing that scene, I didn't see anyone passing by that road.
What happened next?
Once my curiosity was satisfied and having inspected the area without finding anything, I left. I crossed the road again and headed to my car. Just as I was about to open the car door, I heard the cry of a child.
A crying child in the middle of the night in a desolate place?
Yes, the voice of a small child calling for help.
How old did the voice of that child sound?
It was the voice of a baby. I couldn't pinpoint the age, perhaps a few months. I thought maybe my mind had fabricated that sound, that it was my invention. I waited to be sure, to hear it again, but nothing. When I tried to open the car door again, the child's cry sounded again more insistently. The noise came from the same place.
From the place you had inspected before, which had the shape of a nest?
Yes. The child's voice was clear and convincing. I've said it was the cry of a child calling for help, but at the same time it was a scream expressing gratitude.
Gratitude for what?
Its crying was melodious, charming, a friendly greeting like a warm welcome. It was the voice of a child thanking me for responding to his call.
Clearly, you were still influenced by the paranormal situation. I assume you went back to look for the child.
Yes, that's what I did.
And what did you find?
I saw nothing despite searching diligently. I examined everything in detail but found nothing. I began to think I was hallucinating, creating the situation myself, which frustrated me. In a desperate impulse, I decided to leave. Just as I took the first step, I heard the little voice again. I quickly turned around and saw a bundle covered with a fabric similar to a spider web, shimmering under the moonlight.
Did it appear suddenly?
No, it had always been there. Although the moonlight was intense, the object was sheltered in the shadow of a cavity made by branches and debris. The fabric covering it had a colour that allowed it to blend in perfectly. It was a satin gauze that alternated its hue from black to silver and back again. I hadn't seen it before because the reflection of the moon on that special fabric made it change colour.
Did the bundle move?
No, the object didn't move. The reflection of the moonlight on it gave the appearance of movement.
So what exactly was that object?
I approached close enough to observe it. It wasn't a baby. The fabric covering it resembled a thin and transparent gauze. You could see a kind of doll under that mantle. Being close, I had the sensation of being in a scene from the Ridley Scott's movie Alien, where the character slowly approaches an egg and when trying to touch it, it suddenly opens and inserts something into his body.
Yes, I remember that part of the movie. It's a moment of great tension. Were you scared this time?
Honestly, no, I didn't feel fear at all. In fact, I found it even amusing. I thought it was a forgotten toy. Maybe someone had stolen a toy and hidden it there.
Did you think that? Minutes before, you had seen a meteor collide. You didn't find the meteor, but you found the collision imprint. And did you relate that to a stolen toy?
In the midst of confusion, trying to explain things so that everyone understands is difficult. Relating that to a toy sounds absurd, I know. It's like comparing the light of a meteor to the star on top of a Christmas tree. We all associate things within our frame of reference.
So it wasn't a toy?
No. When I delicately removed the fabric to see what it covered, what I saw seemed so absurd that I couldn't contain my laughter.
What a way to ruin the climax of the conversation. What did you see? What was the absurd thing that turned out to be so funny?
I'd been subjected to a sickening level of tension, brought about by a mysterious accident. The encounter with the boy had heightened my libido to an unbearable point. Then, I found myself in a situation that sparked my scientific curiosity. My expectations were focused on discovering some kind of unknown organism or biological entity. I stayed focused, examining with caution to better understand it, despite signs warning me of possible danger. However, what I found was a simple household object.
Was it a toy that you can describe to our audience without being offensive? I ask, because at the beginning of our conversation, you warned that the topic was not suitable for the 8 o'clock audience. My imagination runs wild, and I wonder what kind of object could have seemed so absurd to you that, after all the drama exposed, you ended up bursting into laughter.
It was a pillow.
What, a pillow? One of those we use to rest our heads?
That was the first thing I thought when I saw the object, since it had the shape of a pillow. Of course, it wasn't an ordinary pillow. It shone under the moonlight. I was impressed by its beauty, its luminosity. That was more than just a pillow. When I leaned in to carefully observe its surface, I noticed a maze of threads intertwining to form patterns and geometric symbols. I was impressed by the meticulousness of those labyrinthine shapes representing tunnels. I gazed at it for a few seconds until I finally decided to touch it. The first sensation was like putting my hand in warm water. I understood that the pleasant feeling was an invitation to continue caressing the object. The texture of the surface began to change, and the object started to secrete a viscous liquid similar to the watery and transparent lubricant we know. But this liquid didn't adhere to my hand. Even stranger was seeing my hand start to sink into the object.
What material was the object made of for your hand to sink into it?
I don't know. I was immersed in experiencing the sensations that this phenomenon provoked in me. Investigating the material of the object didn't matter. To this day, it's difficult for me to answer that question.
I insist. What material was it made of? You've mentioned that the object secretes a viscous liquid. What material did the body of the object resemble?
Is light a material?
Light has no mass or volume. Light is an electromagnetic wave. Light is not matter.
The object was composed of light and temperature. But it was a solid light because to the touch it felt like matter. You could touch it and it had texture. It had the solidity of transparent resin. I felt as if I were moulding clay.
So it was more than just light. You mentioned feeling pleasure. What kind of sensations were you experiencing when touching it?
The sensations were continuously changing. At first it was like entering a warm, soft and welcoming space. Then it transformed into a watery sensation. I felt like I was floating in a stream surrounded by aquatic plants and being carried away by a flow of warm water. As I introduced my hand into the object, I experienced the sensation that my body was filled with small bubbles, and these, once inside me, began to burst, causing small orgasmic explosions. When I breathed, the oxygen I inhaled tickled all the cells it oxygenated. At the same time, I felt how my body was illuminated, as if it were a mirror reflecting the entire Milky Way.
I've heard of hallucinogenic mushrooms that provoke a similar sensation.
Yes, I've read about them too. If you're insinuating that I was under the influence of a similar substance, you're mistaken. I don't use drugs.
If everything you're saying is true, I must admit you have an insatiable curiosity. Clearly, exploring the unknown is your strength. I might even suggest that your bravery is exceptional. However, in these circumstances, with that thing devouring your hand, didn't you feel fear?
Let's say that my passion for exploration is stronger than the fear I may feel while doing it.
In that situation, I would have been paralyzed, trembling so much that it would have been impossible for me to articulate any words, with a cold sweat covering me entirely, and a heart rate about to make my heart explode.
I would feel that too if I were swimming in the middle of the ocean and a hungry shark lunged at me.
Are you calling me a coward?
No. In the circumstances I was in, you would have reacted the same way I did. That object invited comfort.
Oh, really?
My narrative doesn't seek to describe an event with catastrophic results. Tragedy is not part of this experience. There are no deaths, conspiracies, or invasions from other worlds.
Oh, isn't it? Where's the appeal then? Remember, you promised us something enjoyable.
Yes, I remember. I also mentioned that the topic is exclusively for an adult audience.
Please, let's avoid explicit sexual obscenities. Are you suggesting that the pillow has sexual connotations?
The pillow was a living object, and as such it generated unexpected reactions.
What do you mean by a living object? Please explain more thoroughly.
It was November and it was cold. I was in the hills in the middle of the night, tired and hungry. When I came into contact with the object and began to explore it, I saw that my entire hand could fit into what was expanding. Then the idea arose that my whole body could fit into it.
Was it really possible? Did you manage to fit into it as if it were a sleeping bag?
I was shivering from the cold. If you find yourself in a rainy place and come across a cave, you enter it. Then curiosity invades you to find out if there's something more inside.
So you used the object as if it were a sleeping bag?
Exactly, I thought that could be a good shelter.
And then what happened? Did you decide to use it as a sleeping bag and spend the whole night inside?
No, it would have been better to spend the night in my car.
So what did you do?
I decided to take the object home with me.
Your adventurous spirit drives you to take extreme risks. If I had been your roommate at that moment and had seen you come home with that object, and you had kindly told me the whole story, I would have run away from that place.
Why?
Out of caution. Right now, you're reminding me again of the movie Alien. The crew of the Nostromo spaceship receives a distress signal from an apparently uninhabited planet. The ship lands and sends an exploration team to investigate the origin of the signal, which comes from an underground cave. Inside the cave, the team discovers a series of eggs. A team member gets too close to one of the eggs, and suddenly the top opens. The curious man leans in, at which point an alien creature living inside it jumps out and quickly attaches to his face. The other crew members, terrified, bring him back to the ship. Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, who is in charge on the ship, refuses to let them in, citing safety protocols. She knows the potential danger of the alien creature. Ripley stands firm in her decision, facing growing tension. Eventually the doors open and the alien enters the ship attached to the crew member's face. Everything Ripley predicted unfolds as the movie progresses. The alien becomes a monster and ends up eliminating the entire crew. Was this your case?
In the movie, Ripley survives.
Should I understand then that you are Ripley? Are you the only survivor and that's why you're here?
You're referring to a science fiction movie designed to evoke terror. Hollywood's purpose is economic benefit. They create a marketable product, refine it to be appealing, and marketing experts turn it into an object of desire. What you summarized about the movie follows the formula: introduction, development, and resolution in 3 acts. Don't compare what happened to me with a movie. What I experienced was real.
My intention has been to warn you about the imprudence of bringing an extremely dangerous object into your home without considering the possible consequences.
You've already noticed my affinity for adventure. The level of dopamine it generates is intense. You must consider the heightened state of excitement I was in.
And acknowledge that you were in a state of illogical thinking.
Yes, it's true. Nothing was logical. There was no one claiming the object, so I took it with me.
I wouldn't have taken something like that to my home.
I anticipated the advantages that it offered. When I held the object in my arms, I realized it had the perfect weight of cotton candy, the treat they sell at fairs. I easily stored it in the trunk of my car. While driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The hand that was inside the pillow remained warm with a strange tingling, while my heart was beating fast. Upon reaching my building, I hurried to my apartment as I had an impressively strong erection. It was urgent to be in private.
I don't understand the connection between the object in question and your sudden sexual impulse.
The sensations described earlier include those of a sexual nature. The small orgasmic explosions mentioned earlier are not a metaphor, they were literal.
Don't you think that the sexual desire you're referring to was a result of generating a high level of dopamine?
I'm aware that that night I experienced a series of extreme phenomena, but I don't believe that was the cause.
So what do you attribute it to?
The purpose of the object was to generate pleasure. Upon reaching my room, I placed the pillow on the bed. I repeated the action of putting my hand on it, and the same thing happened. My hand sank into it. The idea arose to try to immerse myself completely and use it as a sleeping bag. Everything unfolded just as I had imagined. The pillow expanded enough to accommodate my entire body. As I immersed myself, the object yielded space, opening up like a thin and delicate mass that easily served as a wrapper.
There are many things you need to explain, but first, tell me, what happened to your sexual desire?
I would say it intensified due to a combination of unexpected sensory stimuli.
Please give us a detailed explanation.
I believe I mentioned earlier that it was a living object.
A living object? I'm not clear on the terms they taught us in biology class, so I'd prefer not to delve into the definition of what a living object is right now. What did the object do?
When I say it was a living object, I mean it had its own consciousness, it had the ability to act on its own. It was like having a conversation with a living being.
What kind of conversation?
A non-verbal interaction, involving only the senses. It could be considered a kind of multisensory dialogue.
Could you be more specific?
It might involve the use of visual, tactile, auditory, gustatory and olfactory elements. At that moment, I was unaware of all this. Later, I searched a little bit on the internet. I learned that the object could perceive what I felt and fulfill the purpose for which it was created.
Did it come with an instruction manual?
Don't mock me. Of course not. I have my reasons to believe that fulfilling its purpose was the manual.
Are you suggesting that your sexual desire increased?
I wouldn't say it increased. Being inside that object, my sexual nature took on an overwhelming intensity.
How intense did your sexual desire become?
Imagine a 20-year-old male in peak physical condition, with a significant sexual appetite who hasn't ejaculated in a month. Picture their sexual urgency. Envision all that accumulated tension and consider the result of an orgasm in those circumstances. Now prolong it for a reasonably bearable time in a healthy adult. How long do you think you could endure it?
If someone offered me that experience, I would first have to get my body in optimal condition for such an ordeal.
The device would be designed to monitor your physical state and adapt to your capabilities.
Have you ever used drugs?
Yes, of course, the basic ones, the ones you try at the beginning. I've consumed them once or twice in my entire life. I tried them out of curiosity, but I never got hooked.
Isn't that the effect caused by some drug you might have taken?
I'm not into drugs. Honestly, I don't believe there's a substance in this world capable of generating such intensity of pleasure and at the same time contributing to strengthening your health instead of deteriorating it.
Why should I believe everything you're saying?
You don't have to. I'm not here to convince anyone. Although you mentioned seeing something, do you think what you saw was the result of some drug you took?
Let's say it's time to talk about it. I'll explain what I saw, and then I'd like you to comment on it. Does that sound good?
I suppose you're referring to what you saw at the bar?
Yes, I'm talking about that.
Okay.
That night, we coincided at a bar. Despite knowing you well, being familiar with your everyday life, and having a friendly relationship, what I witnessed left me completely astonished. I saw you with someone who was a perfect replica of you. The terrifying part was coming to the conclusion that the replica was so astonishingly accurate that I ruled out the possibility of it being your identical twin. The similarity between twins isn't usually that precise, I observed cautiously, without approaching. I didn't want to come over, greet you, and hear you say, "Let me introduce you to my identical twin brother," something I would never have believed. In both of you, the movements were alarmingly precise. Every gesture, every tilt of the head, facial expression, everything was meticulously reproduced. I was breathless. My mind struggled to understand the incomprehensible, unable to find a rational explanation for such a prodigy. How can such a strange coincidence be possible? Is there any reason behind this terrifying similarity? That person imitated your movements, Your walk, the way you looked, because that person looked like you, walked like you, moved like you. Their face had your same expression, the same skin tone, the same number of freckles, the same number of hairs. There was a synchrony in movements and attitude that horrified me. What do you say to that?
Yes, it's true, we were both physically identical. But the person accompanying me that night was a version far superior to me. My companion was something I could never have been.
Wasn't it your brother?
That was my first mistake. I shouldn't have exposed myself in that way. That entity was not my identical twin brother.
Entity? What do you mean by that?
That wasn't a real person.
Oh no, what was it?
It was a replica of myself, a reproduction. What you saw was the result of cloning.
The person who was with you that night, was that a copy of yourself?
Yes, that person was the product of cloning.
It seems like we're delving into a deeper topic. Cloning involves creating genetically identical copies. Did you clone yourself?
Yes, but the copy wasn't genetically identical. It far surpasses the original. Changes were made in the process to correct some flaws.
Will you tell us how that happened? Will you tell us how you cloned yourself?
Yes, of course. That's why I'm here.
So, what I saw was your clone. And how did that happen?
If I were to give an answer now, I would say it happened by accident.
What, an accident? How did that happen?
Many things have been discovered by accident.
Oh, really? Like what?
Penicillin, plastic, radioactivity, microwaves, painkillers, cheese, wine, yeast, etc. Many things.
Well, yes, but cloning an adult human is another matter.
Don't forget, we are talking about something that doesn't belong to this world.
You listed things from this world discovered by accident.
I might be mistaken in using the word accident. What I did was accidentally discover a resource for which that artifact has been designed.
And you say the copy far surpasses the original?
What you saw was a significantly improved version of myself.
What attributes surpass the original?
It doesn't get sick. The environment doesn't affect its mood. It has no moral or ethical values. Lacking them, it has no prejudices of any kind. It's a programmed entity to interact with humans, and in doing so, it adapts to the circumstances of its possessor without conditioning you in any way. It's like interacting with an angelic being with an IQ of 300. It's pure artificial intelligence, flawlessly perfect.
You state it with such conviction that it seems like you're trying to deceive me. You offer the product with so much enthusiasm that it reminds me of those advertising campaigns promising a miraculous product that turns out to be a scam in the end.
I'm not selling anything. Also, the product I describe is not available.
Could it be that this artifact that clones people and in the process perfects them is the solution to many emotional problems faced by humans?
I'm not a philosopher or a social anthropologist. I have no answer to that question.
Would you recommend the experience?
If something like that were available to the common citizen, it would be everyone's favourite addiction. It surpasses any imagined drug. Draw your own conclusions.
Let's engage in the game of speculation. Does perfection exist?
At the risk of sounding pedantic, I confess that now more than ever, I don't believe in perfection. Does my answer disappoint you?
Doesn't what you described earlier come close to perfection?
The problem is not the object itself. The problem is us humans.
How did cloning happen?
The night you saw me at the bar, I went out to celebrate with my companion, my clone. I didn't expect to run into someone I knew. By the way, I didn't expect you to be gay.
Yes, I am gay. The bar was gay. What were you celebrating?
It marked a year since I found the object.
A year? Significant things must have happened to go out and celebrate. A year living with that is a long time. What happened? Start by telling us how the cloning happened.
Wait, you're getting ahead of yourself. A lot of time passed before we got to cloning.
Summarize the information. Anything related to cloning is relevant. Your adventure from that night has been interesting and amusing, even relaxing, I would say. However, many might believe it's fictional, that you made it up to feel important.
Alex, you yourself have said you've seen something that left you perplexed.
Yes. But that doesn't prove anything. It wasn't such an extraordinary phenomenon either. With a little effort, you could have convinced me that the guy was really your twin brother. Besides, it seems I was the only one who witnessed it. What I saw was a person next to you, nothing more.
I don't want to turn this into a three-ring circus. I want to continue the narrative. You want to know how I cloned myself. Wait until we get to that.
Okay, I'll wait. But don't forget that you promised to tell us today how you cloned yourself.
Yes, I won't forget.
Let's go back to the object that apparently the gods of Olympus sent you. Do you refer to it by a specific name?
Yes, it has a name. Let's call it Sidus, which in Latin means celestial phenomenon.
Wow. Interesting name. Tell us more about Sidus. Describe it, list all its characteristics, its uses, and the benefits that, according to you guessed when you decided to take it with you.
I've already mentioned that Sidus has the shape of a large and long pillow, but it doesn't function like a pillow. Sidus is a living entity. It reacts to impulses emitted by a human body. When you touch its surface, you start to feel a tingling sensation in your hand, signaling that Sidus has begun to record the mood of the person touching it. A visible line appears on its outline immediately. If it's daytime, the line will be bright red. At night, the line is a metallic yellow-green. The line indicates a fold where Sidus will start to yield, eventually opening up as an invitation to enter. Getting into Sidus is like wrapping yourself in a thick quilt. The first sensation once inside is peace, health, and absolute comfort.
You had mentioned earlier that it was like getting into a sleeping bag. Do you still have that idea?
Yes, entering Sidus is very much like that. You look for the zipper, slide it open, and enter. The difference is that once inside, it takes control of the entire situation, reading your desires or needs. As it wraps around you, it transports you to a universe imagined by you.
Before giving us details about the universe that Sidus transports you to, is that thing connected to electrical power?
No. Sidus generates the energy required to carry out its functions. It feeds on solar radiation captured by particles floating in the surrounding environment.
If I found something like that on the street, I would automatically assume it's something not from this world.
I don't think so. When I first saw Sidus, I assumed it was a pillow. You might think it's something novel due to the colours it produces.
Could Sidus then go unnoticed by many if found on the street?
And it would surely attract attention if found in a garbage bin. On the outside, Sidus is like a colourful piece of art. If you find it in an artefact or camping gear store in the forest, I don't know.
What does Sidus look like on the outside?
The exterior is iridescent, pearlescent, changing colour and brightness, displaying a range of colours as it interacts with light. When it gets dark, its shades light up faintly, giving the impression of an illuminated lamp. Its colours during the day are pale. At night, they darken and turn blue, grey-green. The interior is a bit more complicated to explain. At first glance, it might resemble how you imagine the inside of a cow's stomach looks. Different types of filaments form a combination of roughness. I could say they are millions of filaments forming a kind of carpet with geometric patterns of different dimensions. The colour is very similar to that of the human tongue. A slight shine makes you suppose that the surface is moistened by a viscous and transparent liquid. When touched, that sensation disappears. Its texture is basically velvety. The interior is beautiful. It feels clean. You even perceive a soft fragrance reminiscent of the oils and lotions used when wrapping a baby after a bath.
Without trying to offend the conservative ears of our audience, I must admit that after your description, dozens of sexual images come to mind.
And I've told you that Sidus is a pleasure generator. That's its main characteristic. And since sex is a basic need, that would be the predominantly chosen utility if humans had access to someone like him.
Is that what you've done? Have you given it a purely sexual purpose?
Yes, that's what I've done. Like most men, I used to masturbate every day after work. Sometimes I did it 2-3 times in a single session. On weekends, you can imagine, I used masturbation as a way to relieve myself of the stress and tension accumulated during the week. When I met Sidus and discovered that it's a machine that generates sexual pleasure, understandably, I became addicted to it.
You've mentioned the sexual intensity achieved by interacting with Sidus. But how is the interaction? What does it consist of?
A moment ago, you asked if I used drugs, and I said no. I also mentioned that I had some experience using some, including psychedelic mushrooms. Well, the experience of being inside Sidus is somewhat similar to being in an altered state of consciousness, similar to what I experienced when using mushrooms.
So the effects are like being in an altered state of consciousness?
What you experience inside Sidus is real pleasure. Sidus takes control of your desires and makes you perceive them in a real way. You're always conscious. You experience the world you want through your senses. Sidus allows your brain to have all the necessary information for your senses to construct what you want to feel. Being conscious allows you to respond and regulate specific stimuli. Sexual pleasure is built in the brain through external stimuli. What Sidus does is provide you with all the stimuli you need to increase the level of pleasure you choose.
For something potentially so addictive, it must have some flaw.
The flaw is us. Although some people may have issues with compulsive addiction, masturbation itself is not a flaw and would never cease to be recommended. Just because some people can't control their addiction to masturbation doesn't mean that masturbation is unhealthy for most people. No doctor, sexologist, or health scientist would dare to prohibit masturbation.
So, is Sidus specifically designed to sexually satisfy people?
No, I didn't fully understand it, but its uses go beyond being merely a sexual toy. As my story progresses, you'll realize it has surprising applications. This genius is a product built by a mind that doesn't belong to the world we know. It's a machine that expands the limits of our understanding.
What happens when you're inside Sidus? You mentioned using it for sexual satisfaction. Are specifically sexual forms generated inside?
Are you referring to openings where you can insert an erect penis?
I was more thinking of penises of different shapes, sizes, colours. I mean, it's no secret that you and I are gay.
No, those forms don't materialize inside Sidus. Those forms materialize in the mind of the person inside Sidus.
I don't need a Sidus to let my imagination run wild.
I know. That's precisely the imaginative level that Sidus expects from people, to turn it into a desire so powerful that you experience it as if it were real. It's like being in a movie theatre with a fully maximised IMAX 3D screen. Everything that happens there becomes an alternate reality. Everything you imagine becomes real to the extent that your creativity allows.
What are the limits?
You set the limits.
Isn't that dangerous?
Dangerous? Why? Don't forget that it all happens in your mind. You can even imagine jumping from a skyscraper and experience the fall second by second. You can even feel the dismemberment of your body as it crashes against the pavement. You can break down the event into thousandths of a second to explore the tearing that all your cells undergo. You can experience the pain your body would be feeling, divide the entire event into planes, choose the angle that best favours what you want to witness or feel. All with precise clarity, captured by a lens not yet invented. But don't forget that the experience is real.
Did you do that?
I tried. The fear I experienced during the fall was so intense that I thought I would have a heart attack, and I stopped there. I didn't reach the pavement. You have to be made of steel to endure that level of pain.
You leave me speechless. So Sidus is not just a machine for sexual pleasure.
No, Sidus's main function is to gather information. The beauty of its design and the sensual pleasure it offers are just lures to attract people into its jaws.
I don't understand what you mean.
Imagine that Sidus is a flower that emits nectar. It attracts you with its beauty and then rewards you by letting you experience the emotions you desire. The nectar is a sweet and energy-rich substance found in flowers. Its function is to attract pollinators. Sidus attracts you, offers to give you pleasure.
In exchange for what?
I already told you. Sidus is a device that collects information.
Human information?
Yes, layers and layers of information that we have accumulated throughout our lives.
What is the purpose of collecting that information?
The purpose is still not very clear to me.
I don't believe you. I'm sure you know. What else happens inside Sidus?
Our prenatal memory is activated.
Explain, I don't understand.
Being inside Sidus creates a sensation similar to what a fetus feels when it's in the mother's womb.
I don't think I have a good memory of that. I'm feeling nauseous.
Something must have happened in your prenatal stage that remembering it disgusts you.
Are you serious?
The fetus has memory. I don't remember exactly when the fetus begins to show signs of brain activity, but the nervous system is one of the first to develop.
Do you believe in the theory that the fetus is aware of everything happening around it, just like born humans?
Yeah, definitely.
All the images that came to my mind with a sexual connotation disappeared when I pictured myself floating in the amniotic fluid, surrounded by all those viscosities.
I mean, the fetus is the result of a sexual act. It's most likely that your mother continued to engage in sexual activity during your gestation.
I suppose so.
It is known that during pregnancy, many women experience an increase in libido.
I think we are deviating from the topic. I don't feel like speculating on what my mother did with my father while I was in the womb.
We're talking about sex. To explain what happens inside Sidus, I've had to resort to the image of the fetus floating in the amniotic fluid because that's exactly what happens when you're inside Sidus. The rough texture formed by millions of fine filaments adheres to your body. At the same time, a viscous liquid of reddish colours like diluted blood is generated, which might repulse you. However, you overcome that when you start experiencing an unprecedented pleasure. But it's all just appearance because they are not liquids, they are millions of radioactive particles floating around you, causing sensations of absolute well-being.
Earlier, you talked about your fondness for masturbation. There's no doubt that what you were doing was manipulating your penis. We have a clear image of what masturbation implies. When you mention unprecedented pleasure, what do you mean exactly? What part of your body is involved?
The brain. Everything revolves around that.
But there must be something else undergoing modifications.
Yes, of course. There's penile erection and anal frenzy, if that's what you mean.
Yes, that's what I meant. And how and when did the cloning happen?
Entering Sidus for the first time was not my decision. Sidus generates an energy that floods the place it occupies. That energy conditioned my actions on that occasion. I entered Sidus as if it were already a habit. I was inside it for a long time that first time.
How long?
I don't know, it was many hours. I would have liked to spend an entire weekend inside it, but the next day I had to go to work. What happened that night with Sidus was a multi-orgasmic dream. From that night on, my life revolved around spending the most time possible inside Sidus. And when you become a fan of playing the same game every night after work, practice leads you to achieve better results.
Better results?
After several weeks of immersing myself daily in the game with Sidus, one morning I woke up with someone naked sleeping beside me.
Unexpected company?
I thought some confused person had entered my apartment by mistake.
And that person, perhaps drunk and confused, had the key to your apartment. They entered without making noise, undressed, got into your bed, spent the entire night with you, and you didn't notice?
No, I didn't realise. I didn't feel their presence. The strange thing is that I didn't care to know who the stranger was that had spent the night beside me. The person was peacefully sleeping with their back turned.
Was it a man?
Yes, but for me the most confusing part was not waking up inside Sidus, as I do every morning. When I got up and saw that Sidus was nowhere to be found, I panicked. I thought someone had broken in to rob me. I searched everywhere, but there were no signs of a break-in. When I went back to bed to confront that individual, I discovered that person was me.
You?
Yes, me.
The person you found sleeping beside you that morning was the same person I saw you with at the bar?